You're listening to Gender, a Wider Lens.
I'm Stella O'Malley, a psychotherapist in Ireland.
And I'm Sasha Ayad, an adolescent therapist in the United States. Since 2016, my practice has been exclusively dedicated to gender questioning teens and families impacted by gender dysphoria.
I also work with gender questioning teenagers, and I facilitated support meetings for families and individuals who've been impacted by gender issues.
We're curious about the concept of gender and how it's unfolding in the wider culture.
Join us as we look at gender through a wider lens.
Ellie was a gender non-conforming 90s kid in the UK. She became a patient of what came to be the Gender Identity Development Services at the Tavistock. She was seen at the time by Dr. DeCegli, a child and adolescent psychiatrist and the founder of GIDS. Ellie describes her psychological treatment with him and her decision really early on in life that medicalization was just not an option. She tells us about her family life and coming to terms with being gay in her teen years. Ellie is now married to her wife and living happily. And she also describes that gender dysphoria is just something that she and many other lesbians simply learn to live with. She also offers some really interesting insights about the way technology use, and social media in particular, can mimic a kind of schizophrenic experience, with too many competing voices and opinions influencing the minds of teenagers today. She tells us about being featured in a BBC Two children's program as a kid, which you can see if you click on the link in our show notes. We also talk about the book that Hannah Barnes has written, soon to be published, for which Ellie was interviewed. So if you've ever wondered about the Desistance literature and hoped to tie a kind of human story to all of those statistics, then I think you're really going to appreciate this conversation with Ellie. Hi, Stella. I'm really excited to have our guest on today. Do you want to tell us who we have?
Well, we have Ellie Hathaway.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, I spoke to you a month or two ago, and I was fascinated to meet you. And if you want to tell us your story from the beginning, people will kind of understand why I was suddenly very, very exercised. I think you messaged me on Twitter. I don't remember how we got to know each other, but I certainly was really enthralled when we spoke.
I think I messaged you on Twitter with something angry that I said to you to say, you need to look at this or something like that. And then you responded back with a, yes, that's fine. Who are you? And I was like, you didn't rise to me. I don't think you even picked up that I was being like quite passive aggressive, but I was telling you that like, where are all the previous younger Tavistock patients that were treated there before this time now? And like, what, where are they? Who are, because I know they exist. And I was one of them. So I was saying to you, like, they treated people who definitely went on to transition, and they also treated people who didn't go on to transition. And like, where's the information? Did they do any research? And it turns out probably that they don't have any. But so where are those people now? Are they just staying out of the whole thing? But I'm one that kind of put my hand up and was like, I just want to say. So
you were there. So when were you born, and why did you end up in the Tavistock in, I think it was 1992?
Yeah.
For the Gender Identity Development Services?
So I was born in 1983 in September, so it's my birthday next week. Thank you very much. I will be 39.
Oh, happy birthday.
I'm like trying to pretend it's not happening. And yeah, so from a very young age, like literally being 2 years old, I was really rejecting of anything that came at me in the shape of a dress or a nice outfit, apparently. Now, of course, I was a kid, so I don't remember doing it, but I know that I did do it. And my mother, had to deal with the fact that she had a little girl that did not want to wear any of the stuff. But that was around the age of sort of 2.5 that I started to behave that way, apparently. I think it was exactly at the time that my younger sister was born, or around the time my younger sister was born, which is a whole theory I have about what happened to some extent. And then...
Well, can you take a tangent there? This is interesting. What is the theory? I'm curious.
Well,
Me too.
My theory is that my sister was very pretty and cute, and I didn't feel like this is tapping into gender dysphoria, so I didn't feel I just maybe that formative first self-knowledge or self-awareness when you're in maybe nursery or something and looking at other kids, and then you don't feel like you're little and pretty and cute. I'm redheaded, so I'm already like in a minority because I'm ginger, and then I'm freckly, and all these other things which I can go to talk about with gender dysphoria. And then my sister was blonde and had lovely, big eyes, gorgeous big eyes, and went on to become very pretty, very, very pretty. And I think I've got my own theory that it was a, instant. One, the attention had gone to her, and any toddler doesn't like that, do they? The firstborn doesn't like the attention going on to somebody else. You're here all the time now. This is I have to share this with you. So it's that like rebellion, or first rebellion and rejection. So I don't know if it was what can I do to get attention, or whether it was, well, that if I'm not what she is, then what am I? So, but that's when I first started to behave in that way. Apparently, reject it. But before that, I couldn't reject it, could I?
What is?
I was an infant.
What is the age difference?
Pardon?
What is the age difference between the two of you?
Exactly 2 years. Exactly 2 years.
Okay.
2 years and 2 years.
Yeah. So you started to have these two-year-old kind of existential crises when your sister was born. She was a baby, which I think is interesting because at that moment, you couldn't really know whether she would turn out to be pretty or feminine or lovely.
I would argue a little bit differently. I would say she was born at 2. So you're just usurped by I'm just imagining this, let me run with it. And you're usurped, the attention is spread. So you're kind of giving the side eye to the little one, but everybody's giving all the attention to the little one. They're talking about how gorgeous she is. And as you're coming into consciousness over the next 12 months, 18 months, you're learning about the concept of pretty. And you're learning about the concept of, oh, isn't she so gorgeous? And then, oh, you're a good girl too.
Yeah.
And you're literally, as you're coming into consciousness of life, it's going in. It rings really true for me as a theory, I have to say.
Yeah, because then
my own theory,
and at the same,
when I was a kid was my mother and my sister very, very feminine, and I'd imagine like you, I just thought, oh, I'm just bigger and. Like the way you kind of saw yourself as redhead and freckly, it's just I'm not that. Do you know what I mean? So it rings very true for me. But sorry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, the then rejection stage started or went from 2 to 4, like 4. So definitely by 4, that's what I was doing. So it wasn't immediate, but as I started to get control, the time when small children, toddlers, start to no, I don't want it. Chuck stuff back at you and not be a baby anymore, to being more, decision making of or selective of their own things. Yeah. So
that's right. The power to say no.
The power to say no. I don't want that. And then that went on from 4 right up through to the end of puberty, pretty much, but not. There was stages beyond like 13, 14, 15 that I can definitely go into. And then the Tavistock time, probably around 8, 9, 10, that era was, because it was 92, I was 9, 92. So, yeah. So
what prompted your family to take you to Tavistock? I guess, obviously you had been struggling with mom from a pretty young age about clothes and so on. But then what happened? Why did they take you to Tavistock at that point?
So they don't really know the exact answer. My mum's best idea is that my dad researched it and found them. But because he was quite I think they were just worried that I wasn't happy. I don't think it was about wanting to change me. But some interesting things through me telling my mother I was going to be on this has come out about how unhappy she was, or how worried she was about me in the longer term. And also because I got bullied a lot. I got bullied all the time because when I was 6, I got my hair cut short. So I had short hair and I And if you watch my YouTube film, the film that I made, I did look just like a boy. So I was always being a boy, like did say I wanted to be a boy, wish I'd been born a boy, wanted to be a boy. Life would be so much easier if I was a boy. I want to do all these things, and everybody sort of doesn't like me doing them the way I do them. I want to just play sport, and be active. I didn't see the house after school ever. Like, I was in the woods doing stuff, and I only had boyfriends, like male friends that I played with, and pretty much I was the leader. I was in charge. So I had said that I wanted to be a boy, and I don't know if they conflated that with being really unhappy with my bullying, which was being bullied by people, because every day of my life I got asked, are you a boy or a girl? Like, every day of my childhood. So by people that were not friends in my school, just other people in school, or people in the street, people everywhere. You go swimming and you get asked it. My mum constantly had to explain what I was like. If we went to Marks and Spencer's to go and buy something, people be like, say to me, they'd gender me to be boy, and my mum would actually say, no, sorry, actually she's a girl. And they'd be like, okay, that's confused me. So that was all going on then. And we didn't have any groups that were like, don't misgender people, and don't, my mum had to just constantly deal with this on her own. So my dad, I think, through them discussing it, was like, let's see what's out there. And then they found through, I don't know how they found it, but they did. Yeah.
I have a question about this. So you talked about initially certain aspects of your refusal for like clothes or whatever was a way to kind of regain your power. And given that all these people were confused about your gender when you were a child, at the time, do you remember that feeling empowering, or did it feel belittling, or did it confuse you further? I mean, and I'm sure you have a perspective now as an adult in hindsight, but like, what was that like when you were young?
What the being, are you a boy or a girl question was just like, it was just tiresome more than anything. It was just, why does this matter? And why, as an adult or as a school peer, like, why do you need to ask? And then the funny thing was, the other day I went to a job at work and I got asked by a small child if I was a boy or a girl. And I said, does it matter? Does it matter? What do you think? That's what I said. So,
I remember as a kid it being incredibly tiresome being asked, are you a boy or a girl? Everywhere you went, are you a boy or girl? And then I remember it became really grating because I used to nearly anticipate it. So I suppose self-consciousness was coming in, that I knew we'd go in somewhere and inevitably I was going to be asked, are you a boy or a girl? And I realised I was starting to kind of tense up, thinking, oh, here we go. They're going to look at me. It's going to be, are you a boy or a girl? Yeah. I do remember all that coming in. It was incredibly tiresome.
Yeah. By then you just get,
I remember it too.
I'm a girl, and I'm a girl. Yeah, you're a girl. And then you get the like, well, you don't look like a girl. You'd be like, okay. And then I used to think, well, what do girls look like? Sometimes that, I used to think, what do girls look like? And I still say that about lots of things. Oh, you don't look like a whatever. Well, what does that look like? That question. It puts more like a mirror to the person that's asking the question. It's not about you. Like, so yeah, I got that all the time. And it was bullying because I used to get like beaten up a little bit, but I didn't get beaten up because I used to get the question or called a he, she, and then I used to respond with my fists because I was good at it up until a point where puberty, and then the boys tended to get better at that than I was because it was puberty, and funnily enough they got stronger and they got the testosterone, and I didn't get the testosterone, but that was after Tavistock, obviously. So yeah.
And when I spoke to you, there seemed to be another reason. Well, I put this together, and I might be wrong, why you might have been brought to the gender identity services, could have been maybe because your mother had her own experience as a child, and so might have been kind of acquainted to having, medical attention when you're a child.
Yeah, so I think maybe, and not only that, but my mum was a nurse, and then she was a health visitor, so she was in child development. So I had a lot of medical influence in my family as well. So there was a lot of like engagement with services. Like we were probably, my dad had also had work that but my mum's childhood history was having what they called intersex, but it was a development condition of sexual development, which is known as congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which stunts growth and also can give you atypical presentation of genitalia when in infancy, when you're born. So my mum was born that way as well. And she's always had treatment for it, including through Great Ormond Street when she was a very small child. So I don't know if it was that, but she doesn't really make the connection herself. But then my mum's very like lives in the moment of things. So she's kind of like, when we talk about this stuff, she's like, I dealt with it. It's like, I'm done. Like, you're fine. She's not worried. She's not worried about me now, like at all. But I did say to her, like,
but you
must have really struggled with this stuff. And she said, I cried every day. And I didn't even know that. I had no idea until I recently had this conversation when she said I cried every day about worrying about you, basically. So that was upsetting.
So she was crying every day worrying about you while she had extraordinary treatment. You I believe the whole family moved from Wales to London or near London for a year to get her treatment.
They moved forever. No, they moved.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did they?
From Wales, from mid Wales to Essex in about 1960. My mum's side of the family, my mum's mum and dad moved with her, and the rest of, her youngest sibling wasn't born yet, but moved to Essex, to Chelmsford, to be near to Great Ormond Street, because my mum would need to have not only the treatment she was currently undergoing, but continuing checks all the way through childhood to make sure that her growth development.
And did you say she had a twin or something?
She's got a younger sister and who also has the condition, but it wasn't as severe. My aunt didn't need the same level of surgical intervention that my mum had, because it's different in each child depending on, it's different in each child and how it presents. So, yeah, I know. it's all threaded through. And when I discuss this with my friends now, with how interested I've got currently in this discussion, they won't be like, oh yeah, we know now, or whatever, like, or oh, she's going off about that again. But I say, like, I've been thinking about this my whole life. Like, my whole life has been interested or about this discussion. It's not, has been in my head reverberating around the meaning of this. And links to sexual orientation.
Well, I mean, intergenerationally, even in your mother, this is really deep.
Yeah. So I have it, like,
okay,
exists with all of this exists within me, which is why I got involved in the discussion, because I feel like I've got a side of the story to tell, or my own story to tell, which yeah.
When you were growing up, were you aware of your mother's DSD? It was like, is that something you knew as a child, that she had this kind of surgical correction? I mean, there's a lot there. I'm wondering, at what age did you learn about that?
I wouldn't have been aware of that, and I wasn't aware of it until later, like teenage years, because when I became aware that my mum always had to take tablets every day, and what tablets was she taking? So you don't really get that until you're like that little bit older, when you start to really engage with the routine of daily life. So when I started to realize that she was always, and that there was always panic about making sure she had the tablets because she has to have them, which is still like that now. So like prescriptions, or like saying to go and get my prescription to my dad for it, and him being like, oh, why are we leaving this why you always leave this to the last minute, that discussion, and please just go to the pharmacy for me, that, like, and me being aware that, like, I was always like, what are they? Those are my tablets, what do you need them for? And then that's when, because I have this, and and then I was like looking it up, and I remember when I first that was even like sort of pre-internet, so I couldn't look it up, but she'd explained it to me. And then there was a time when it became internet, because I was in the era of like AOL online, dial up,
Yeah.
So I think I looked it up then and read about it, and I was like, oh, right, okay. And then my mum went.
Did you have the Encyclopedia Britannica? Because I was born in 82, and that's how I looked up everything for a long time. One of like 60 volumes.
Like this. Yeah. And and I always worry about those poor books now. Where are they? Along with all the videos. Like, so.
It's funny. When I was a kid, I always really liked the look. We didn't have them in our house. And I always thought, when I'm older, I'm going to get an Encyclopedia Britannica. But by the time I was older, that I thought of it was like, it's like getting a quill. Like, what the hell is it? So I never actually got around to getting one.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what your mother taking? What was it? Hormones? This prescription, and I wonder, is it genetic? Is there a genetic follow through? Like, might your children, or could there be a genetic impact?
If I was to have a child with somebody with the same genetic. No, I do know about it, but I'd have to do the science. But if I was to be with somebody that had that and it's recessive, that would potentially because it's recessive. So it's recessive in me, so it's recessive. So, and that's what happened with my grandparents. It was recessive in both, and that's what happens. So it's that part of. I just remember my biology, which I did so badly at in A-level, and I know how things work, but yeah.
The Mendelian genetics and the little quadrants, that's what popped into my head.
Research homework before, but I could people should just Google it, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and find it's like not.
And was your mom taking hormones?
She takes hormones, yeah, they are hormones, but mostly it's the controlling of salt wastage. So there's actually. What she can have is an adrenal crisis if she doesn't take them. So it's an adrenal crisis. So it's
okay.
But it has this effect on. So it doesn't last with the she's a woman, obviously. She had me. But it did stunt. It's like growth stunting. So she's very, very small. So she's 4'9", 10. And then she was told she couldn't have children, not because of the condition, but because she was they didn't think she'd be able to carry safely. So there was a lot of that. And then she did the risking getting pregnant anyway, because she was like, well, I want them. So.
And I'm getting a picture of your mother, and so there she is, 4'9", and she's been through all of this the family moved down to get her treatment, and this is big events happening in her life as a child. And then you coming along, if I'm right, and you kind of sorted in yourself. I've seen the film. I'm sure listeners to this episode will watch the film. We'll put it in the links. And, you're very steady in yourself, and you're very, very kind of self-contained. Anybody would be delighted with you as a kid, because it's like, there's a kid who knows what she's about. Like, you know what I mean? I'd be proud to be your mother. And I'm really kind of surprised that she was crying every day because of you. That kind of makes me think, oh, really? I wonder why.
I don't know, maybe because she had to deal with a lot with the relentless people asking all the time. That's probably going to grind you down, isn't it? To have to and with me saying I do want to be a boy, and they would have known that happened. They knew that people transitioned. So maybe she thought that I might, and maybe
I suppose I'm kind of circling that. Maybe. I'd love to know, but maybe she was thinking she's going to transition. Maybe she was thinking that. I don't know. She certainly brought you to the gender identity services.
Yeah.
Can you remember going there?
Oh yeah, I remember going there. Yeah, it's a weird, but the memories I've got are about like.
Spill.
Well, I've got the memories I've got are about like parking the car and then going in and the hallways and going into a little room and talking to the doctor, which was Dr. DeChegley, and the discussions, which were just discussions. That's what they were. Like, to me, they were just, my parents they'd come down, we'd all go. It's like me, my mum, my dad and my sister would all go. I remember, I don't know why, like, it was not, oh, your dad's just going to take you this time. But every time that we went, we all went. And then they'd take my sister usually to go and do something whilst I had my appointment. And then they come back for me. So it was not like, oh, mum's just going to take you or dad's just going to take you. I don't know why they did it that way, but they did. It must have been a big thing that my mum wanted my dad there and my dad wanted to be there. And so then my sister was there too. And it used to like be finishing slightly early from school and driving down from Oxford to London and then going and having, it was like.
How often?
Like every 3 months, I think, or so. Every 3 months.
Okay. So I'm interested if you remember the content of those discussions. And obviously you sit here before us not having medicalized, as far as I can presume. So what happened in those sessions and what was the, quote, treatment recommended to your family?
It was just talking. There was just a lot of talking. So, and the talking was, what do you feel about yourself? And I know I used to say things like, my hands are so big. Like, I've got bigger hands than any of the other girls. I've got bigger hands than the boys in my class. I've got the biggest hands. And look at my legs and like, I'm really muscly and I'm really strong. And all of these things, like, that's what we talk about. Like, how do I feel about my body in comparison to other people? And that, and then gender roles, lots about gender roles, which was, and what do I like to do? Like, what do I like to do? And what are my activities? And then I really think, because it's not clear in my head, and and I'd love to read the notes. If the notes are anywhere, I'd love to read the notes, but where they are, I do not know. Is that he, at the time, would have said, well, do you think those roles are fixed? Or do you think anyone owns those roles? And then question me being like, oh, well, maybe nobody does own those roles, all those activities, all those things. But other people are telling me that. So through the course of the time of my therapy, that was the ultimate conclusion when I was discharged, which was, no, I don't want to be a boy. Like, I don't need to be a boy. What I need is to be allowed to do what the boys are doing. I just need to be allowed to do what the boys are doing. Now, that was 92, and we've gone through a whole revolution of, girls can be whatever as well as boys, although we've still got a way to go. Because I don't know if you've looked at the... I always make this point, like, nobody cares about how many male midwives there are. But that's a reason for that, and I understand it, but it's like, there's like 95% female midwives, but we don't tell, like, men are there at majority of births, I'm pretty sure. But we don't tell men they can be midwives. So, but we need to encourage women to do men's jobs. So it's always that side, but it's not. Not make, like, encourage men to do jobs that are more caring jobs. You don't see that a lot. Do you know what I mean? Like, we haven't pushed that a lot, but
male nannies.
Yeah.
Male nannies, like, men are still told that they can't do caring, or which actually, and that's because there's reasons behind that which I'm not going into. I know why it is, but if we were doing that engagement in the right way early off, we would be breaking down who's responsible to do what in the society we're in, like, and who's allowed to do it, and who's trusted to do it, and who's capable, and there's a lot, but. Then again, that discussion in the clinics and that discussion with DeChegley was that sex does matter, because when you then go to puberty, this was a point where I had to make a decision, and I did make a decision. And not only that, but we talked about medicalization, and we talked about the realities of it. And I remember thinking, and I know what I thought, and I don't want to offend anybody when I say it, but I remember thinking, that's ridiculous. Like, that's ridiculous. How does that work? like we lived in a very open household, so my dad was always quite naked, like not in my room, but he's in the bathroom shaving and having his, so we were very, and we went on a holiday to nudist beaches. My parents used to, and it was so embarrassing. Me and my sister would sit there cringing, of course, like even at 8, 9, and feeling really like mum and dad are walking to the sea totally naked. Ugh. But we lived in that household that just didn't have to cover up all the time. And I knew what things looked like, and I knew how things worked. And you're grasping the whole how does sex work at the time. But I remember thinking about medicalization and surgery. I remember thinking that's ridiculous. Like, that path is just really silly. Doesn't sound good. I'll go with that one, even though the other path is not great, because I'm not going to get muscles and I'm not going to get taller so that I can play better basketball. I'm not going to, I'm not going to get that stuff but the other path is also, it just seems silly. That's what I thought at 9, 10. So that's what I mean when I don't want to offend anybody, because that path is right for them. But my dysphoria was, worked out, I guess. But I still have it. I always say
okay. I have to say something, and I wonder, Stella, if we're thinking the same thing. When we interviewed the Dutch, we were talking about this patient 0, and Stella, you very rightly pointed out, this is a young girl who was treated by one of the psychiatrists or clinicians, and this girl had really serious puberty phobia. She was terrified of beginning puberty. And what strikes me about your story, Ellie, is that you had a much more comfortable relationship with how bodies change, what naked adult bodies look like. You knew what was coming, and you didn't seem to have that terror of entering into that phase of life where like your body develops and, all of that. So I feel very interested in, Stella, feel free to jump in. Like, I feel like that seems to be a really important part of how you were able to have this bravery moving into puberty, whereas some other kids are so scared of growing up that maybe that puberty phobia intermingles with their gender distresses to create like this need to make that medical decision around puberty. It's interesting, the doctor said you have to make a decision here, and you were like, why would I have to make a decision? I know what's coming,
I don't think
so. I'm just interested in
told me to make the decision as much as I recognized that I was going to be making a decision. I could make a decision.
Okay.
I was told there were options to make a decision. There was two.
And can I point out before you go any further? You were treated by Domenico De Scegli. Am I pronouncing that right? De Sceglio.
Yeah.
And he founded the Gender Identity Service in 1989. And almost from there, everything has happened. He really was the beginning of, you could say, way back in the day, John Money and Robert Stoller in 1960s, but it had gone. And then you could say, Harry Benjamin, and you could say the Harry Benjamin Association, but they were really quite closed down by 1979, 1980. And then De Sceglio came he met, funny enough, very reminiscent of the Dutch researchers. He met a teenage girl who wanted to be a boy, who was suicidal. And when she transitioned, it set him on his path. And he developed the Gender Identity Development Services and founded them in 1989. And he was only 3 years into it when he met you. And it sounds like some people consider him the devil, but it sounds like he gave you good treatment.
Yeah, so I said, they said if you build it, they will come, won't they? So did he found a treatment service that was necessary and that is really helpful, or did he find something that has gone on to be, that creates his patients? So I said, he's like the Mark Zuckerberg of gender identity. So, Facebook's fantastic and we've all connected, and I'm still friends with 700 people that I once met in a bar or something, or maybe even never met. But I also have all my, Facebook Messenger, and I can set up contacts and people can get in touch with me that I'd never still be in touch with. It's something that has revolutionized the world, but it's had it's got really bad, dark things that happen because of it, like data capture. Now they send me, I just have to talk about a trampoline on here and I'll have an ad for a trampoline on my Facebook if I go and look on there. It's disturbing. So, I think his intentions were good, but I think the longer term outcomes maybe now are worrying in what happened to the patient referral population rise in conjunction with social media, and why they didn't ask what was happening or ask questions about that earlier. Haven't asked questions about it.
And arguably, something can start very well. Maybe the Dutch started very well, and as you grow success, doctors and arrogance are often well knitted together. And they get a few successes, as we all do. And they think
I'm engaged to a doctor, so I know what doctors are like. But my doctor is not that kind of doctor. But she works with plenty of them, so I've heard enough to last me a lifetime about how doctors can be, but in all different fields. So you get it. Doctors will get into things because they do want help, but some of them get into it purely for status and control, and the fact that they've got people's lives in their hands with a sense of power. I don't want to do him down because I think because of the engagement I had with Dr. Jegley was really positive, and he did the watchful waiting thing, but he's now basically not linked. He's beyond the service now. He's in his retirement. He's sort of an honorary trustee. It's not his service now, and it hasn't been his service. In fact, I think the whole way that the service went was the point where he said, I've done my bit now, over to you, and left it, as the service it's been since about 2012, 2013, because he talks about that on, there's a lecture series of his on YouTube. Yeah. So...
Ellie, how many years were you seen at the service before you were kind of just sent along your way to live life?
Only for about 1 to 2 years, but that's because I worked my stuff out pretty quickly, and that was because I had a really stable base outside of just the gender dysphoria. Like, I had really good friendship groups. I came from a very stable background and place. My parents were together. So I had a stable family unit. We were financially stable because my dad was a solicitor and my mum, she worked for the NHS for 40 years. So my parents were just doing all the, whether they liked it or not, they were like, they did everything to provide the most, best environment children can grow up in, really. And same with my friends. I had friends from, I had a majority male group of friends, but then I had a couple of girls that I became really, really close with. One in particular, still my friend. I introduced her to her husband, so still one of my best friends. And she was my sister's best friend at the time's older sister. So she was 1 year older than me, but we were in the same school. And her and my mum, her mother and my mum became really close and still are friends. So she was somebody that was 1 year older than me, totally different character, really, really into presenting a certain way to attract male attention, let's say. And she won't mind me saying that. And we were totally different, but she just loved me. We just played, we just spent loads of time, hang out all the time together. And that was a different influence. So because she was around from the age of me being mostly about 12, and we played on the same football team. We played on five-a-side football, and her mum coached the team.
Okay.
And that was an influential female friend I had when I didn't have many close ones. As I started to enter puberty, and I know that she gave me my first when I started my periods. He was teaching me how I should use a tampon, what tampons were like, for example. So I had that one connection to that, and what guided me, the day that I first started my period ever, because this is stark in my mind. I was getting my hair buzz cut in the living room by art. We used to have a hairdressers used to come into the house, and some of the students come and cut my hair at home. So she'd cut my mum's hair, then she cut my hair, then she cut my sister's hair. And so I was having my like shave up, which I do have it now, shave up and, short back and sides. And then I suddenly realised like something weird's going on, that thing. And then I stopped and I ran upstairs and I was like, oh, whoa. I think I came down and I was like, Mum, I think, that thing's happened. I said it. So she was like, oh, right, okay. So she sorted me out. She gave me the stuff. Just go and put that, give me a pad and stick it on the pants. And I remember that, my first feeling of that was like, this is what happens now for like, what is it? You have to wear this thing. I just remember. So I was really angry about it. And then my dad bought me a guitar case as a congratulations.
Oh, that's so lovely.
I hope you had a guitar. You didn't just get an empty case.
Empty case. No, I did. I had guitars. I used to, because I was like, that was it. I love rock and roll. I played basketball and did karate. I did all this sport stuff like that. I was mostly the only girl doing it. That's what I'm saying. Like there were other girls in my karate class, but they were mostly women. Like they were older women doing self-defense. There was just young boys, me, and then a couple of older women and stuff like that. So I did all those activities, and my dad, I did have guitars. So my dad thought, okay, your guitar case. You need a guitar case. Very practical man, see, very, very practical man. Well done, you've started your period.
Yeah.
Here's a guitar case. I was like, so.
That's so lovely.
But yeah, so
I'm still thinking of Desheglio,
yeah.
Desheglio, and yeah. So he I keep on pronouncing that wrong. He was carrying out watchful waiting, and you were a product as such of watchful waiting, and it went well. And it sounds like it was gentle, pleasant therapy. That it was compassionate and exploratory, and it worked. And I wonder today, would that be called conversion therapy? I also wonder today how you would fare, even with your lovely family, even with the family that was so solid, if you follow me, and they really were so solid behind you.
I can't.
I just wonder, how much the context of the time mattered.
I can't answer the question because I didn't have this thing. And this does everything. I think this does everything. And I'm addicted to it now. I'm addicted to it now a lot of the time. And it disrupts my relationships with people, and it disrupts my relationships with my partner. And it's, and there's things that I quite wish I could really, people have got more self-control than me, definitely, over it. And if I have that personality now, probably I would have had it then. I'm sure I would have had it then, I like to think I wouldn't, but I have no idea. I think it's...
And not just that, I just think about, too, your friends and the people in your life. They, for the most part, it sounds like they just let you be yourself. Even your female friend, you guys were very, very different. And her act of compassion was just treating you like another teammate or another friend, helping you with your hair. And had you both had the phone, the thing that you are talking about now, perhaps she would have believed that the compassionate thing for her to do was to ask you, do you want to be a boy? Shall I call you a boy? When are you going to transition? Because these seem to be the common things that young people talk with each other about when they do notice some gender nonconformity. So not only the addictive properties of it, but the way these ideas have kind of seeped into everybody's consciousness and changed the way we do interact with each other and how we think about gender.
Yeah, nobody ever needed to ask me what I was going to be or my labels for anything, because the only people who asked me labels were strangers outside of our environment, not people I was trying to be friends with or anything. They knew what I was, and also none of it mattered anyway. So, nobody was cajoling me in directions or anything. It was just about what we did. Everything was just about activity. It's not, it wasn't about an identity thing. It was, yeah, my dysphoria was definitely involved. My young dysphoria was definitely involved. And later, the questions about my sexuality, that was another one, because I was asking myself those sort of questions as well, as was everybody else that was around me. That's what you do. But we weren't trying to pick like a profile thing. You know, we didn't have to describe ourselves. We didn't have to put a sheet out that said, this is me, so that when I can interact with as that person, you know, I wasn't having to interact as that person that I've picked. And then if my inner workings change, I don't need to change that either. And I don't have to have the shame of having decided to be it and then changing it after. Or we didn't. We just evolved through. And the conversations that were had were just about, it was, I do still feel it was like one of the luckiest times to be, the 90s weren't great for everything, but it was one of the luckiest times to be growing up like that. Like, I was thinking about the sorts of TV shows that we were watching and that kind of thing. I was in 97 when I was 13 and Buffy the Vampire Slayer came out, which is something I've been watching recently, which was a female superhero. And it was that sort of thing that started to be good representation of women doing the sort of things that I wanted to do and giving me power to be a woman doing them too, right? I don't think that a lot of that was there before that. So it was just then more, but it felt like an innocent time to me. And I don't know if it feels like that for children who are young these days. I feel there's too much pressure to pick something, to be something, and to look a certain way, or to project an image on here because it asks you the questions. If you go on to do the profile, it asks you. And if you ask something, it feels that you have to give an answer, right? But what if
completely.
By the way,
were you given a diagnosis?
That's why I love to see the notes.
Were you given a diagnosis or anything?
I expect my parents were. Said that, oh, well, she's definitely, you know, I'm sure that they would have said she's definitely had gender dysphoria or she's got gender dysphoria, which I did, because I know I did, because it was how I felt about my body. And I said the other day, because I talked to some people, mostly on social media stuff, about this, but I'll still say I have it. Like, there'll be days when I'll be in the shower or be in, you know, doing things, or I'll be naked and I'll catch myself and I'll still think that I wish I had, you know, a male chest, or I wish I had male properties. All the time. Still happens. I just live with it. It's just a tickle in the back of the brain.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of our podcast. We work very hard to maintain high-quality content for this show, and we're grateful to Rhyme and GenSpect for supporting us.
Rhyme, or Rethink Identity Medicine Ethics, is a non-profit organisation dedicated to improving long-term care for gender-variant individuals. Visit rethinkime.org to learn more.
And GenSpect is an international alliance of parents and professional groups whose aim is to advocate for parents of gender-questioning children and young people.
If you'd like to become a patron, you'll have access to weekly transcripts and special Q&As, and you can join our listener community.
Now back to the show. So Ellie, you know, you have this tickle in the back of your brain of gender dysphoria. So it's always there. What does that look like, and how do you manage it, I guess?
So I catch myself in moments when I'm, you know, everybody looks in the mirror and looks at their physique, and certainly as you get older as well, you evaluate yourself. And this isn't just me, but everybody does this, I think. So it's a universal feeling. It's something that I really want to convey, that it's not just something that is dominated if you have gender issues. It's everybody has a relationship to their gender, everybody, and it's on a scale. It's on this scale. So, you know, and if you feel it's dysphoric, maybe you're a woman or a man that's never questioned whether you should have the parts that you have or what they should look like. You just accept it because that, you know, then you don't have any dysphoria to do with gender, but everybody has a body dysmorphia, can have body dysmorphia. And so I still have those moments where I feel like I would have been better if I had been male. I still have those moments where I look at my physique, even though I'm going to be 39 years old tomorrow, and say I still kind of wish or think that I would have been better with a male body. And I don't know why, but it could be because I have a very muscular physique. It could be because I don't see myself as ever having had really strong feminine attractive qualities. It's not something I can answer as to why I have that feeling or sensation in myself, but I will catch myself in a mirror. I will catch myself changing. I will, it will be when I wear shorts in the summer, but I hate to expose my legs quite often, and that's because they're still very muscly legs. My legs were the thing that really opened my mind to, or made, recall being between 4, 5, 6, 7 and seeing my legs as different to other girls' legs. That was one of the strong things. I had naturally huge calf muscles that I didn't, where do they come from? I don't know where. And only when I became older did I see other women having the same muscular physique, in sport, or in, let's say looking at female rugby players or footballers, or with that same physique, when I became, part of socialization where I got to experience that. But when I was very small, I know that I felt aside or separate or different. I definitely felt that. And so I can't, it's very difficult to pinpoint how it comes about and when, but I still have these moments. And how I deal with it is I still say, I made the decision that I would not, I ruled out transition at a certain age. I still rule out transition, continue to rule it out, because I value my body is sexed female. I believe that the healthiest thing for me to do is to go with my natural, waning of physical strength that happens to every single person on the planet as they age. And I do not want to do anything to my body that might affect that hormonally or surgically. So I still put that first as a priority, because I believe that we should always prioritize be as healthy as possible. So that's how I mitigate it with why wouldn't I change it. And also because I personally do not believe that I would give myself that, I would not present, it would not match as to what I want naturally, which would be to have that magical power to know what it's like to be a man, to have everything that gives to let me, and I've talked about height. I'm 5'4". I'm 163 centimeters. The average man, not all men, but the average man is much taller than me. And the thing that I desired in masculinity was to have height. And I will never have height, no matter what I would do. I would never have height. So there are things that it would never give me. So why, if it would never give me those things, I'd just say to myself, it will never give you those things. So you wouldn't do it. I won't choose it. That's basically how it feels. That's how it feels.
I just ask, there was something there was a bit of a jump that I found very interesting, because I was nodding along when you were saying, gender dysphoric, you, a little niggle, it's there, but you're well able to handle it by the sounds of it, and correct me if I'm wrong. And it's just a niggle, it's a stone in your shoe on some level, and it's there, and you handle it. And then you said, it was my legs that always triggered me. And then you said something surprising, because you said, my legs were what made me feel not feminine. I thought you were going to say I was proud of my legs because they were so manly. But you didn't say that at all. It's like, I hate my legs because they're manly. If you follow me, or maybe I've completely misunderstood you.
At times I'm proud of my legs. At other times I'm not proud of them. It depends on, I don't know, maybe sometimes I've been complimented and I'll be complimented by my partner, my lovers, or, people that are in an intimate space with. And then in other times it might be somebody else saying, God, your legs are muscly, and in a context that I don't want that to be, I don't want them to be observed or commented on by that individual, because they're not somebody that has that entitlement or should be making that comment. Does that make sense? They're a stranger, or they're somebody that I'm not close to. And it's an observation rather than a compliment, potentially. It's not an intimate compliment. So it depends on that. So there's times when I am proud, and I train. I go to I do a physical job. I work on my musculature for strength and because that's what I have, and I don't want to be strong in them. But when I was a child, it didn't feel, you don't have a relationship necessarily with working out. You're a kid, so it was different when I was small to have this natural musculature. To have a very strong physique.
I wanted to just comment on this because I find it so interesting how the context and the framing, of course, changes your experience of, let's say, and I mean, muscularity exists on a spectrum. And like, as context, I'm really into exercise and weight training specifically. And I'm in a block of my training right now that's strength focused. So when you're in that mindset, you're really thinking actually about muscular development. And I wish my legs would grow and get bigger. But it depends on the framing, because if you are thinking about, oh, that person made a derogatory comment about my muscularity, that means something very different than, like you said, your lover or your partner admiring your muscularity. So I just find it so interesting that even when we talk about gender dysphoria, we almost have to ask as a follow-up question, like, in comparison to what? Like, you're feeling insecure about your traits in comparison to what and in what context? Which really throws a wrench in the whole DSM diagnostic criteria, because it doesn't really take into account things like context or how old you are or how do you understand, health versus appearance versus aesthetics. Like, there are all of these interesting questions wrapped up in this discussion. I just find it in gender dysphoria is not just one static thing.
No, and it changes over time. And as if I talk about desistance, which is what I experienced from about 12 years old onwards, desistance. And I've been thinking about it as well quite recently that, also I was never affirmed in the you're born in the wrong body belief, let's say. That was never done for me. So my parents didn't affirm it. And when I went to the clinic, when I went to GIDS, they never affirmed it. So I was never affirmed. I was always, still in the mindset that I was female and I had a female body and my body was sex female. And when I did go through the therapy and when I contextualized my relationship to my body and when I then started to desist, the feelings waned, but it was a really difficult period from about 13 to 17 where I was still figuring out how much I would present female and dressing, still covering my body in very baggy clothing, still hiding myself or revealing bits and glimpses. I remember a stark moment being on our school stage where I used to wear cut-off tees and I had not yet put a bra on, but I now had breasts. And I remember realizing that my breast could be seen through the cut-off t-shirt and wondering, and thinking, having this shocking, people now can see I've got breasts and people can see them through here if I'm not wearing a sports bra. And to this day now, somebody might say, well, that's okay. That's in this day now, I think modern perspective might be that it's okay. But me then, it wasn't okay. That prompted to go and start wearing sports bras, but I never have worn female bras. I don't wear bras ever. And if you ask many gay women, they never wear proper bras. They can't wear proper bras. They have an essence of dysphoria about wearing proper bras, and we only will ever wear sports bras. And wearing a proper bra for anything, occasion, anything like that makes us feel pretty I feel a lot of discomfort in that moment. And probably this is universal to other women. I bet they hate wearing bras, but I don't wear them often enough to know. I live in sports bras, and I always have since that moment onwards. The other moment I had was going to a friend's birthday party, and it was going to be. I don't remember if she said, "Oh, it's going to be this fancy dress thing. It's going to be. I don't really mind what you wear, but if you want, we were this close friendship. I'm still friends with her today." And she said, "But if you want to wear a dress that day, I'll help you find one." And I was like, I remember having this: how will people relate to me if I do put this dress on? will it change my relationship with people, my friends, everybody? Or, will they accept it? Will they make comment? It was a bold moment to do. So I went off and found this dress. Funny story. I went off and found this dress. It was her 16th birthday. I went off and found this dress that I thought, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this properly. So this was this like slinky thing. It was completely made like, imagine what a mermaid's tail. It was like that, right? So I went all out on this day, and it was very, very uncomfortable. I remember how uncomfortable it was. And I turned up, and my friend had the exact same dress. And it was her birthday. So we picked the same dress.
So you stole the show in many ways.
We just got on with it. She went, oh. when I said maybe you going to wear a dress on my birthday, I didn't mean wear the dress I'm wearing on my birthday.
I mean, wear my dress.
So we had the same dress, and we laugh about that till this day.
That's incredible.
Can I just ask another question about that? Because it was so interesting, because sometimes I find a lot of people argue with me and others, there's no such thing as gender dysphoria and it's just body dysmorphia. And I've always gone, well, whatever I experienced wasn't body dysmorphia, although I can see why people can perceive it at that. It was, and I'm going to annoy people probably, but it did feel like an all-over rejection, just like you very evocatively described there. An all-over rejection of feminine, of girl, and it was, let's say, breasts and stuff like that, but it wasn't as well. It was a more an all-over vibe, which I know sounds very woo-woo. And then and forgive me, but then for me, what moved me out, and I'm wondering, did it maybe move you out, and was it a different path? For me, what moved me out, I think, from that place was the kind of the powerful feeling of being sexually attractive to other people. If you follow me, that was just so shocking that other people thought I was very sexy, for example. And me going, oh, right, okay. And it kind of it renegotiated my relationship with my body as such. Other people's adoration of my body brought me around to my body.
Yeah. And I had that attention starting to happen onwards from 14 or so, but no, later than that, much later than that. But I started to experience really strong same-sex attraction from 13 onwards. Definitely, vividly, crush after crush after crush on different girls, all of whom were straight. So, and I knew they were straight. We used to joke about gaydar. Gaydar is a thing. Gaydar exists. No matter what you say, we don't know why. It's another element of research I'd love to understand about how homosexual, same-sex attracted brains work. It's still unexplained, but I, would know that those girls were not, and those were the ones I had crushes on. So I never, would do anything about them apart from trying to be in the exact same space as that girl every single moment I possibly could.
Yeah.
And the first attention I got from and first sexual intimacy I had was with men. But that's because they were the ones that were coming to me, and women weren't coming to me. Not that I knew of. Maybe there were girls that I had that were trying to be near to me, but I didn't realize it, and that was never really, for those relationships with men, it was because they were showing interest and they were pursuing, but it wasn't the thing I truly necessarily wanted. But it was giving me a sense of, it gives you that sense of more confidence. It starts to, it's not really what I wanted. What I wanted was the girls that I couldn't have, the women that I couldn't have.
And might that be why, because I'm not same-sex attracted, I'm heterosexual, might that be why, I don't know, but might that be why it left me, but it didn't leave you, that lingering...
Don't know. That's something we can't answer. I mean, again, these are things you can't answer if you just subscribe certain things and you subscribe certain terminologies and everything. You cannot answer these questions if you've got preconceived ideas of everything. You have to talk about it and you have to explore it, and you can't do it within confines of being told that it's right or wrong to talk about it in any certain ways and you're offending people. How are you going to ever learn, or how are we ever going to understand the reasons behind any of this, or people, you know, and it's also individual experiences. Everybody, I'm just talking about my experience, but that's not true for everybody else. They've got different ones.
But you did say something that I've observed too, which is a lot of, and I'm going back a little bit, but a lot of gay women, for example, don't wear bras and only wear sports bras and have this kind of really uncomfortable feeling when putting themselves in quote unquote very feminine clothing or feminine appearance. So there's something there, which of course, each individual experience is different, but there's something there that feels like a common denominator. And I think, you know, if anything, your experience is very common for gay people and gay women, that like you have these unrequited crushes that you recognize will never go anywhere, and that's really difficult and heartbreaking. And if anything, I wonder, you know, kids growing up today, would that make them even more dysphoric? Like the only people that are approaching me are males, and I don't like that. And actually everybody that I like tends to be attracted to males if I were a male. Like, you know, that kind of rationale. I don't know. What do you think?
Maybe, yes. But then there's more sort of suggestion now that you can be more open in your sexuality younger and declare yourself attracted, or, you know, whatever. And so, but they like to pretend that we didn't have girls that experimented lots with bisexuality that turned out not to be at all, you know, ultimately defining same-sex attracted. And I see the same thing happening with gender. I see people trying it on and saying that they're boys potentially, and they're you know, I see that same thing. It's like we've moved into a next level with gender identity, where they're trying it on instead of trying on bisexuality, which was a lot of the girls around me were doing that. And we pretend that didn't happen, but it did. Boys didn't do it, because that's even greater level of homophobia that comes at them. But the girls, when I was in the 90s and onwards, 90s to 2000s, they were experimenting, kissing their friends at parties. When we started to drink a bit and play around with drinking and have parties, that's what happened. But many of those girls never would have gone on to have fully fledged gay relationships and lesbian relationships. They did it as a phase during adolescence, and then they stopped doing it after most of my cohort was around going to university or just before that, or when they got boyfriends at 17 and 18 and those relationships would stick. They stopped doing it. So we like to pretend that didn't happen, that girls don't do that girls don't play around with their identity really a lot during that era, that time of development, but they do. And that's what they're still doing now. They're still playing around with their identity. Only now the new thing to play with is your gender. It's not your sexuality, because we've accepted accepted gay people in Western society. So it's been, because it's accepted, it's not taboo anymore to muck about with. But this is the new frontier. There's a new frontier, so let's play around with that frontier. Unfortunately, you can't take back playing around with hormones. You can't take back playing around with surgery. But you can take back kissing a girl in the back of a nightclub and move on from that, and it never affects your future. Do you see?
Yes. Katie Herzog called this lesbian until graduation. That was her title for this. And you're so right, this phenomenon. Do you want to comment a little bit about how coming into your sexuality, or, you know, you talked about meeting other gay women, presumably as you got older, did that help you to kind of accept the niggle in the back of your brain? You know, did anything about your sexuality contribute to you just kind of settling in with this experience?
Eventually it was a difficult road for me. Lots of girls, like particularly like a first girlfriend I had, she knew exactly what she was. She had, you know, she'd had one boyfriend and ruled it out from the moment on that just wasn't the right fit. For me, it was a bit more of a longer pathway. And university was the first time when I sort of landed in a group of many same-sex attracted and definitively same-sex attracted women. And then through my 20s, that kind of, that solidified as my sexuality. And I went on to play in roller derby was this great resource of meeting gay women, and I did that, and that's where I met my partner now, because it was a source of, if you want, it became this untold secret. Like, if you want to find, you've got rugby, you've got sport, but roller derby is the place to go. So I started playing roller derby, and I met my partner there. That was when I was 28, and it was still a fluctuating thing for me. It was still fluctuating, and I'd sort of still call myself bisexual ultimately because I don't rule out the male body as a sex partner, but my romantic desire and my romantic compatibility sits with women more than men. It's something I've worked out. I'm just an individual. But coming to terms with the whole thing, I wouldn't have said, I didn't admit to my family that I was properly same-sex attracted until I was 25. So that took a long time. Now, like I said, people can do it much quicker, or they define it online through themselves, or they're faster. I think a lot now. Because so much improvement was made, and we now have the right to marry. But that didn't, before I was out, I didn't have the right to marry when I came out properly. I still didn't have that legal right then. So, all this stuff has been fought for, and it's been achieved. And the question now is, what do you do when it's been achieved? And what's, like I said, what do you do when it's been achieved? But it doesn't mean that then you need to start to tell people more. You can go past a certain point where you're now influencing what people think rather than allowing them to develop it for themselves, I think. Because we have influencers. Now we have influencers. I didn't have influencers.
Yeah, you really had to go internal and figure things out and use your life experience and your real relationships to sort through this, which is just such a drastically different story than like the 10-year-old girl who's been online during COVID, and after a few weeks of Google searches, she says, "Mom, I'm a lesbian." And it's such a different experience, and obviously much more maturity and time.
I'd say this about complete online kind of reading and listening to that voices is not much more different than a mental health problem of being like schizophrenia. If you're listening to lots of different voices and you're reading it and they're not generated from yourself, and you're not actually having a back and forth conversation with somebody in your near proximity, your actual physical being, that seems to me like an induced psychosis to some extent. I've had problems with my mental health, and I've had a moment in time where I was talking to my own friends with a mental health problem. When I had a mental health manic episode, I was talking to my own friends, and they were not in the room with me. But again, I go back to the phone and the device. You can be talking to people; they're not in the room with you. You can be talking to people, and all they're only interpreting what you put onto a screen, and then you're interpreting what they put back, and it can elevate and elevate and elevate, and these discussions are supposedly comforting to children forming their ideas about themselves. But that can also imagine that there's also a massive risk that can be damaging for somebody to be leading them in a certain direction, and they're not leading themselves,
That's right.
So
wow,
you have
what
to
an
be
amazing
really
analogy.
careful about that.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's been unfetteredly happened for this generation of kids. We've seen how that's gone. We've seen how an 18-year-old can pick up a ARA rifle and walk into a school because of things that are happening mental health-wise. But we can't see how it's happening in gender. We can't see how it's happening in identity as well. The mass identity crisis going on. It's a mass mental health crisis going on because of, this is a drug. Social media is a drug. So you give drugs to children. They could use that in a positive way or a negative way. It is a drug. It's addictive. It has all the same qualities of drugs. But we don't see it. We don't treat it like a drug.
Yeah. Wow.
So I didn't have that. I didn't have a drug in my head. I had my own thoughts in my head. I had my comfort. I had my family support. I had my friendship, my network to reference off. I didn't have a drug in my head influencing it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's a lovely YouTube video which we mentioned, and it'll be in the notes, of you, and you were very comfortable. And is there any last thoughts you have around, just there's a few things coming up, I think, that you wanted to flag, and a couple of pointers about maybe that YouTube video, or I don't think it was a YouTube video, it's from the 90s. And in a way, it's kind of precursor to the celebration of the trans kid. It was much more respectful kind of analysis.
What was the context?
So they came to my school. The BBC used to do these short films. It was a series that was on BBC Two, Saturday morning TV that kids used to have. We used to have Saturday morning TV that was for 8 to 9 to 10-year-olds. It was, so the school decided to invite producers to canvass us, and you put in a little form and you said what you might want to talk about. And I, don't really understand how they picked my thing, because I don't really know how I pitched it. But I think I just said I'm different from other people. I'm a girl, but I wear all this stuff, and I like to play with boys. I only play with boys, and I only do this, and and for some reason, I don't know if that is exactly what I said. I honestly couldn't remember, but I know that they came and they said, "Oh, they've picked your application out," and I was like, "Oh, well, now I have to really do this thing." So I was given a camera and a battery. It was an old school, you put it on, you carry it around, and you properly, and I was given charging docks and, film. And they said, have this camera for 3 weeks and film and talk about yourself. So that's what I did. And then they came to the house and they brought all their editing equipment and they edited it down. And what they edited down and eventually showed was the film that you see. After all of this had started and all this, people don't like to acknowledge that it's a debate, but there's a court case going on right now between two charities involved in this. That means it definitely is a debate, because you end up in a court of law over some stuff like this, about this topic, then it's a debate, right? So, so they came to my house, they edited the film with me. And it was shown on the BBC, and it was shown twice, and I got paid £250 for each time, so that was good, because I was like, yeah, I could buy a surfboard with that, and I got the rights to it from the BBC archives to put it up, because I just thought people would see, because I remember I was so I was so embarrassed by it. I was so embarrassed by it at the time. I was so embarrassed by it when I was 15, 16, 17, early 20s. I was still embarrassed by this film. And now I'm like, actually, this is sort of captures the kind of child that would be involved in this now. Actually, this captures how, if my parents had said, yes, you are a boy, we believe and we affirm you're a boy, and then I was told by everybody else influencing me, and I had a smartphone or I was online and everybody was telling me, that have made that decision for me, that I made myself with the right clinician at the time, So that's why I put that film out. And I tried to do it very tactfully, to say, you can watch this and make your own mind up, but this is a vignette of history. This is a 5-minute vignette of history, to say, this isn't new. This isn't something that this isn't something that's just come about. And people agree that they agree this isn't new. This isn't something that's just come about. Yeah. What has just come about is a 4,000% increase in referrals to it. What has come about is the number of children that are taking hormones in their teenage years. What has, that was not what was happening. Why is it happening now? Yeah. We can't stop not asking that question and not being allowed to find the answers. So crucial. I put the film out to show people. I made sure there were no comments, because I do not want people to start arguing about it. It's not, they can make their own mind up as to seeing what they see in my film. But my film shows I was confident. Well, I was confident because I was confident that I was still a really, really amazing human being. And I was having fun. I was just a kid having fun. And I was out. And you can see how much activity I was doing. You can see what I was doing. Yeah, you were busy. I was a busy kid. My parents couldn't keep up with it. They were so my poor dad just had to finish work, come home, drive me to another activity after another activity after another activity, which was all pretty much physically based, So I think the things that I was doing were healthy. I was expending energy. I was part of teams. I was getting I think I was getting healthy influences, and I was supported, and I was loved, and I knew all of that. I knew all of it, and I wasn't looking for it elsewhere.
That's right.
So, fortunately.
Lastly, I want to ask you about an upcoming book. I want to make sure to give you a space to talk about this. Hannah Barnes is writing a book. Can you say more about this? I know you were interviewed extensively for it.
Yes. So Hannah's writing a book, or has written now a book, which will be published shortly. It's about the Gender Identity Service, the Tavistock Clinic, which, people can look at what has recently taken place there. And they're arguing whether the Tavistock is being closed down because of its failings, or it's being closed down because it's not providing an adequate service to the demand. I'd say both is true. And she's written this, she's been researching, this is new that she's done this, she's been researching this for many years. And she interviewed me because I was there, and I contacted her to say that she should look into it. And she was like, well, I'm actually writing a book on it. And then she said, can I interview you? So I said, of course. And then she said, because I went to the University of Essex, so she found this study. So I was followed up in my university years, about 2005, by a PhD candidate that was working for the Tavistock, who wrote this paper, and I'm in it. So that was one follow-up they'd done. But when I spoke to Hannah, she said that out of, up to 100 patients of the clinic, she'd only found 10. This researcher, when she found me, had only found 10 of us that were able to be contacted and followed through to find out where we are now. Having gone to Tavistock when I was there, 92-3, to follow me up in 2005 and find out, was I still gender dysphoric? Had I transitioned? Was I gay or straight? All these questions that were asked. But that was basically the context of this paper that this, I haven't got her name in my head now, but it'll be in the book. And so Hannah interviewed me for the book, which will be coming out. It's just about that, about the lack of data, about the failure to capture the data, about the lack of follow-up from the work that Tavistock was doing from the early 90s onwards, which was when the clinic was founded. And it's going to be showing how they continue to not follow up their patients, mostly. That's at least the bit that Hannah's, alluded to, is that they've not followed up. So, and it's very unusual in such an experimental treatment base to not continue to follow up on your patients after treatment and to which way people go. So, that's going to be interesting to read as to what Hannah has found in her research.
Yeah, I've heard so much about this book. I've heard loads of people who've been interviewed. I think it's going to be a cracker. I think it's going to be a really, really good book. It's going to be a real takedown by the sounds of it of the Tavistock in a very comprehensive, forensic kind of manner. This has been really, really fascinating. Is there any last things you want to say before we close up? But it's been really real education about it all.
No, I just want people to try and maintain more of an open mind, that the truth is somewhere between the two extremes of everything, because it always is between two extremes. So, there's one side accusing certain people of being completely transphobic and hateful and all of the rest of it, and there's another side accusing them of being deliberate monsters that don't want the best for their children and child abusers. And these are not truth. The truth is that there is complications and reasons and factors affecting this whole thing when children are having, when children are confused or worried about their identity, and that leading into being gender specifically. Mm-hmm. There is a truth between the two polarized opinions, and if more people were allowed to say, and let's look at fact and let's look at evidence and let's evidence it and let's look at science, mm-hmm. then we'll find the actual best pathway for dealing with it. That's what needs to be allowed, but you can't shut it down and not talk about it. You have to continue to talk about it, and you have to ask more children what they actually think. That's not just Reddit posts.
Yeah. No. Wow, well said. Thank you so much, Ellie. We appreciate your time on the show. It was great.
It was brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on Gender, A Wider Lens. This podcast is sponsored by Rhyme and GenSpect, and listener support means a lot to us. The best way to help is to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
Follow us on social media, and if you'd like to become a patron, you'll have access to weekly transcripts of the show, special Q&As, and you can join our listener community. Just go to our Linktree. That's linktr.ee/widerlenspod.
Our discussions are for educational purposes only and are not intended as a substitute for mental health services.